All right. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for another VBCF chat. My name is Erin Stagletter. I'm the Education Manager for Virginia Breast Cancer Foundation. And, we talk a lot about advocating for yourself as a patient here at VBCF, but what does that actually look like? So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. I'm here with Tara Daudani, the Vice President of our VBCF Board. We're going to talk about her experience with advocating for herself while going through her breast cancer treatment. So Tara, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Erin.
Yeah, and can you, just to start off, tell me a little bit about your breast cancer story?
Yeah, so 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 3 triple negative breast cancer after finding a lump in my breast. I was 37, so I wasn't at an age where mammograms were recommended. So it was my finding, and it had spread to my lymph nodes. So I had very aggressive chemotherapy, radiation, and 7 surgeries between the mastectomy and the reconstruction, kind of, all around that time. I'm very, very happy to say that I have no evidence of disease today. But it was a pretty scary diagnosis, being 37 and having 2 young kids.
Yeah. So during that process, did you have a clarifying moment that told you that you have to advocate for your own care?
Yeah, that actually came really early in the process. After I found the lump, I'm a worrier. So the next business day, I went to my gynecologist and I had her examine it. And she said, it's probably nothing, but let's get you in for a mammogram. The earliest we can get you in is 2 weeks from now. And here's a list of mammogram providers. And I went to my car and I just said, that's not good enough. 2 weeks isn't going to work for me. I can't live with not knowing what this is for 2 weeks. And if it's something, I need to be acting more quickly. So I sat in my car after that appointment and I called the numbers on the list until I got one later that week.
That's great. And from this experience, it's always a delicate process. It seems like how you thread the needle between advocating for yourself and trusting your provider's medical knowledge.
Yeah, I think that's a really great question because advocating for yourself doesn't necessarily mean going against your providers or challenging your providers. I think there's a couple things. The first thing is that I have found providers that I generally trust. So when they make recommendations or advice, I'm inclined to trust them because I've built a baseline trust with them. And I say make recommendations or advice because that's what it is. You have to remember that they're not telling you what you have to do. They're telling you what they believe you should do in order to get the best care. And you have to think about that with yourself and say, does this make sense? Does this feel right for me? Does this work with my goals? Because different people have different goals. I know that sounds weird, but my goal as a young woman was to get rid of the cancer and to eliminate as much as I could a chance of recurrence. So I made decisions like I opted to go for the radiation because the current data says that the radiation will reduce my chance of recurrence. So that was kind of my guiding principle when I was faced with the decision, what is going to help me reach those goals that I've set for my treatment. So I found providers that I trust. I also came about asking my questions in a curious way, not a confrontational way. And I developed a relationship with those providers and I asked for data because I like data. So, I said, what are the studies saying? What are there was a choice that I had to make between my doctor wanted me to take an additional chemo drug. And I eventually opted to not take that drug because I asked for information and I gave myself a minute to think about it and to take time to process that decision. Because when you hear the words, you have cancer, everything kind of gets real cloudy real fast, and it sent shockwaves through my body. And I think you have the ability to take a minute and to think about it and to think things through so you're not making rash decisions. And I want everybody to know that it's the patient's decision what treatment they go through. The doctors are highly trained, and in my case, highly compassionate individuals that want the best for you. And I really made sure that I found a team that I felt very comfortable with, and to help me make those decisions. But at the end of the day, I recognize that it is my decision.
Yeah, that's something that we hear from folks is that, you get the diagnosis and you have to make decisions. It feels like rapid fire. You don't have time to deal with the emotional fallout and decide, well, is this really what I want? It sounds like you were definitely focused on, you know, getting rid of the cancer quantity of life. Like that's especially, it makes sense your age and having young children, things like that. For some other folks, that might not be their focus. It might be their quality of life. So
Exactly.
they might want to make different decisions on their treatment. And I think that that's important to discuss too. Both are valid.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it depends, cancer is one disease, but it's a million different types under that umbrella. So the parameters of the decisions you have to make are going to be different for everybody. So there's not a one size fits all answer. And that's why you really need to, internalize that and think about what works for you and your life and your goals.
Yeah. So you mentioned, putting your medical team together. What are the things that you look for when you're sort of interviewing a healthcare provider?
Yeah, and I really love my medical team. I think that really contributed to the success of my treatments because I felt so confident with them. Um, I This is going to sound, bizarre, but I looked for doctors that I clicked with and that I could have a conversation with, and who didn't mind explaining things to me, and who knew that I like to see data and I like to have a minute to think and to, be the one to make those decisions. I also looked for people that I trusted, who I knew were smart and compassionate and, you know, um, up on the latest research in the fields that they practice. And I I really feel like if I hadn't met them in a doctor's office, I could be friends with a lot of them because they're, just really wonderful people. And that is to say, if you go to a doctor and you don't click with them or you don't feel like they're aligned with you, it is okay and acceptable and encouraged to go get a second opinion and to go talk to another doctor. I really think that part of the success of any treatment is you being comfortable and working with someone who is aligned with you.
Yeah, and it's sort of anecdotally, I've heard from some Black women who are survivors that they got their diagnosis and then they took their time finding a doctor that they aligned with and felt more comfortable with. And that could potentially be contributing to a delay in beginning of treatment. So it's something that we need to look at within the medical system as well as diversifying that system.
So I will tell you, I started my treatment at one hospital and then transferred to another hospital, but I was making sure that I started that treatment as soon as possible. And then I kind of got the medical team in place. I was comfortable with the treatment plan, but I actually switched doctors 2 times after my first chemo treatment. So, you do want to be quick about it if you can, and act as quickly as you can and maybe get that treatment going, and then you can get second opinions. That's totally possible.
That's great that you mentioned that. And with that, obviously there's no naming names, but are there any kind of red flags that came up for you when it comes to working with a provider that told you like, oh no, I don't feel comfortable and I need to move on?
Yeah, I think there was one provider who was offering me medication, that like pre-chemo medication that I wasn't really interested in taking, and I didn't I wasn't able to see the data behind it. It was also in a setting that didn't make me comfortable. I did not like their chemo rooms. And so I knew the thought of spending long hours there would really bother me, and I would not be comfortable there. So I wanted to be in a space where I felt comfortable and supported, and also be able to have more of a conversation about those medications. So I just said, thank you. I think I'm gonna transfer. It was the same hospital system, but a different location and a different doctor. So this doctor is a wonderful doctor, just not the right one for me.
And so with what you have learned throughout your treatment, how do you prepare for a doctor's appointment now, whether it's with an oncologist or any other doctor? What kinds of steps do you go through to make sure you're prepared?
So I use the Notes app on my phone quite a bit. And about a week leading up to the appointment, or whenever I start thinking of questions I want to ask the doctor, I just write them down. I write down anything I want to talk about, because inevitably when I get in the doctor's office, my mind goes blank, or I'm worried about changing into the gown, or, whatever it is. So I keep a really good list of questions. I use the online portals, and I send my providers questions, or things that are coming up in between doctor's appointments. So I keep a line of communication open with them. I call it chemo brain. I'm not sure, but I really rely on my calendar a lot. During my treatment, my husband was able to join me quite a bit, and he was the keeper of all that data. We were really fortunate that he was able to play such a large part in those appointments and my caretaking, because he allowed me to really focus on the emotional aspect of it and to make those decisions. And he kept all the data. We actually created a Google Doc and shared it with medical professionals in my family and anyone that needed access to the data, with doctors' names, doctors' phone numbers, important bits of information, my chemo regimen. So when I was switching providers, we made sure that we had the exact same chemo regimen. And that was really helpful. And I actually still 4 years later sometimes access that Google Doc if I need to get in touch with someone, or if I need to look back and see, a specific piece of my record. So I think just writing things down and going in with a list of questions, and I'll pull out that Notes app on my phone and I'll go down the list and ask them. They say, do you have any other questions? I said, let me check, and I'll look through it. And if you have the right provider, they don't mind. They're there to answer your questions, and it makes me feel better. I hate that feeling when you leave an appointment and you're like, I forgot. So that's really kind of the worst feeling.
Yeah, and my understanding too is that the questions that you ask as a patient inform the doctor as to what's really going on with you, and gives them some clues as to what other questions to ask.
Yeah. It's very
and,
important. Oh, go ahead, Erin. I'm sorry.
oh, sorry. I was just going to say, and two, if you're not married or partnered, it is also okay to bring a friend to appointments, because doctors should let anyone that you say is okay to hear your information into the appointment with you. You don't want to be bringing everybody, but I think bringing one care partner is fine.
Yeah, if there's a point person that is willing and able to do that for you, I highly recommend it. It's a lot of information and it's coming at you fast. And to be able to just have someone write that down and organize it for you is a huge help. And if you don't have that person, take notes during your appointment. Get out that Notes app, take a piece of paper, whatever works for you, but don't be afraid to say, hold on a minute, let me write that down. I want to be able to remember it. Because if you're like me, you leave the appointment and you're like, wait a second, what was that detail? And then you can, go back and look, and it's really helpful as you move through that path.
Yeah, another thing that we've mentioned before about getting the most out of your doctor's appointment is giving sort of a background of a symptom you're experiencing. Because if you go in there and tell your doctor, things are fine, I've just been tired lately, they're like, oh, okay, it's small talk, there's not really much there. But if you go and say, I've been so tired, I haven't been able to get out of bed before 2 p.m. I worry about falling asleep while driving. Those are clues for the doctor to ask more. So keeping a timeline too, like how long you've been experiencing something, yeah, it just kind of clicks something in their brains.
I think that there's this kind of, a desire, or you tend to just be like, yeah, I'm fine. Like, I don't have cancer, so I'm fine, right? Which, okay, yeah, you don't have cancer, which is great. But there are a lot of, as I move through survivorship, I'm learning that there is a lot of things that just still follow you as the years go on. And the doctors really have a lot of tools to help you with that, but you have to tell them. I have just some lingering radiation tightness where I was radiated, and to be able to explain that specifically allows them to say, okay, well, I think a physical therapist, or I think a lymphedema specialist, or, to really allow them to help in a very specific way, rather than saying, yeah, I'm fine. I just can't move my arm, but I'm fine.
Yeah, and I know that for some folks there's a cultural taboo against asking your doctor questions, or some people feel like they're bothering the doctor if they mention certain symptoms. So, or feel like they're making a big deal out of nothing.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of work through those feelings?
Well, so here's the thing. The doctors are there to answer your questions. And if, first of all, if you don't feel comfortable, maybe you should get a different doctor, first of all. But there's also a team behind the doctors that are the nurses, the nurse practitioners, the PAs that can also answer a lot of those questions for you. So if you would rather speak with them, you can do that. But here's the thing, that you have that doctor's time when you're in the doctor appointment. That's your time to use. You can use it however you wish. So ask those questions. I think that if you're coming at it from a genuinely curious, concerned, this is for my health type of way, they're going to be really receptive to that. And this is what they do. This is their life's work. And, I find a lot of times the doctors like explaining these things. They like telling me about the medications, and they like telling me, helping me figure out problems and live a longer, healthier life. That's what they do.
Well, Tara, thank you so much for chatting with me today. Is there anything that I didn't ask you, or you haven't yet had the opportunity to say, that you would like to make sure to leave folks with?
I think I just want to encourage everyone to be your own best advocate and to use your voice. And if there's a little voice inside you, let that voice speak up, and don't be afraid, because you're going to be the person that's looking out for your own best interest.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Tara. And if you're interested in watching more of our chats, we have them on our website, on our blog page. So we'll see you next time. Thanks.
Thanks, Erin.